नमस्कार मित्र। ओम सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति।
Namaskar and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to today's Vimarsh talk by Shri Rajiv Gauba, former Cabinet Secretary and now member NITI Aayog, on a very topical issue, challenges of governance for Viksit Bharat 2047. I thank Gaubaji for finding time from his busy schedule and visiting us today at the VIF and also agreeing to interact with the public. This is your first visit to the VIF, and I hope you would visit us again. You all know Gaubaji very well. He is presently, as I said, the member of NITI Aayog and the chairperson of high-level committees of non-financial regulatory reforms and Viksit Bharat goals. As the longest-serving Cabinet Secretary of India during 2019 to 2024, Shri Gauba has been involved with several path-breaking reforms and initiatives. He supervised India's fight against COVID-19 pandemic, crafting a whole-of-government's approach to handle the crisis. He was instrumental in the opening up of space and defense sectors. He played a key role in the abrogation of Article 370 and the implementation of the National Action Plan to combat left-wing extremism. And we are seeing the positive results of the fight against LWE. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1982. In his long career, Shri Gauba has had vast experience in the government. He has been the Union Home Secretary, Secretary in the Ministry of Urban Development, Chief Secretary Jharkhand, and has worked in senior positions in the Ministries of Defense, Environment and Forest, Electronic and Information Technology. We are looking forward to benefiting from Shri Gauba's insights into how he sees the challenges before India in achieving the goal of Viksit Bharat 2047. As Cabinet Secretary, he has had the opportunity to see and improve the functioning of the entire government machinery. He has also worked closely with the Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues and knows their mindset very well. He has been instrumental in the formulation and implementation of policies which have laid the foundation of India becoming a developed country by 2047. Friends, indeed, in the last 11 years, the government has pursued a radical reform agenda focusing on strengthening the economy, improving the welfare of the people, and modernizing the cumbersome and archaic regulatory system. Schemes like Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Srijan Karyakram, and Pradhan Mantri Sadak Vikas Yojana, Sadak Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, Ayushman Bharat, UPI, GST, and so many other schemes. They have transformed the economy and laid the foundation for our future growth. As a result of the reforms carried out in the last decade, India is in much better place today than before and is well on its way to becoming a developed country. These schemes have strengthened the country. It is no surprise that we were able to fight the pandemic better than many other countries, defend the nation against external aggression, emerge as the fourth largest economy, and improve our stature in the international committee. However, we cannot underestimate the challenges ahead. The world is in a flux and the external environment is turning out to be volatile and uncertain. The ongoing conflicts, sanctions, tariff and technology wars, and supply chain disruptions will have an adverse impact on all countries, including India. On the domestic front, the reform agenda is still incomplete. Agricultural reforms had to be shelved due to political reasons. The reform of judiciary, police, and criminal justice system have yet to be undertaken. Although digitalization has significantly improved productivity, efficiency, and transparency, corruption continues to be a major concern. The country has experienced economic growth, but social inequality and regional disparities remain. The ease of doing business has improved, but is still a work in progress. Young demographic profile of the country is a great asset, but there is also a challenge of providing high quality education, skills, employment, and meeting their aspirations. The growing use of drugs and narcotics amongst the youth is a matter of deep concern. The energy transition to net zero by 2070 is going to be a challenging task, as it would require change of energy mix, decarbonization of several industrial sectors. This could prove to be disruptive. Economic growth is of course important, but so are environment and ecology. Land, water, and air pollution have emerged as impediments to ease of living and economic growth. The country would need to find a way to deal with these problems. As life becomes more complex and lifestyles change, citizens' requirements and expectations also change. Access to health, education, the internet, clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, and data privacy are equally important. A disaster-resilient infrastructure, healthy surroundings, safe roads, and transportation are essential components for good governance. Poorly planned urbanization, the existence of vast tracts of slums, mountains of garbage, and unchecked pollution of life-giving rivers are huge challenges for governance. Expeditious redressal of grievances without harassment is critical to good governance. The backlog of unresolved cases in the courts is detrimental to the fundamental task of providing justice. Free and fair elections and the right balance between the legislature, executive, and judiciary, strong federalism, strong local bodies are necessary for the health of democracy and democratic institutions. Governance reforms should include reforms in these areas as well. The worsening global and regional environment has made the task of national security even more complex. Today, the concept of security has broadened to encompass traditional as well as non-traditional threats like climate change, demography, technology sovereignty, data protection, economic security, food, energy, and water security, etc. A holistic, all-of-nation approach would be needed to deal with the contemporary security challenges. Nobody could be better than Shri Gauba to give us insights into this very, very vast task of governance and governance reforms. He has dealt with this all, and I'm sure he has a lot to say. So I request Gaubaji to take the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your kind words of introduction. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. And I see a number of familiar faces here, friends, colleagues with whom I have had the pleasure of working in different capacities. So, a very good afternoon to all of you. You know, when I was told about the topic of today's Vimarsh, that is challenges of governance for Viksit Bharat, I thought to myself that even 3 years ago, this would have been kind of, surreal. Because before Prime Minister Modi articulated his vision to make India a developed country by 2047 from the ramparts of Red Fort on August 15, 2022, no one had ventured to think so big. Our ambitions used to be quite modest. We aspire to eliminate poverty, upgrade our physical infrastructure and human development indicators in an incremental fashion. A bold, coherent, all-encompassing, transformative vision was lacking. But then, almost overnight since then, so to speak, the idea has captured national imagination. And today, Viksit Bharat has become part of our national lexicon, newspaper articles, industry forums, academic conferences. Like here today, you name it, there is conversation around this theme. And this is, to my mind, nothing short of a tectonic shift in how we think of our future as a nation. The Prime Minister's call for Viksit Bharat was not a spur of the moment statement or announcement. It was based on solid foundation that had been laid post 2014, wide ranging and deep seated reforms were taken, some of which Dr. Gupta also mentioned. Number of initiatives were launched, regulatory reforms, governance reforms, policy reforms, institutional reforms. We saw the rollout of GST in 2017, creating a unified national market to replace a fragmented tax structure. Foreign direct investment caps were raised or removed across the board. The insolvency and bankruptcy regime has filled a void that had constrained our financial system for decades. Corporate taxes and personal income tax rates were slashed. Faceless income tax assessment was introduced. Sectors like space and defense, again, which Dr. Gupta mentioned, were opened up like never before. And then there has been massive scale up of infrastructure, reorientation of public spending, both in the central government and at the instance of the center in the states also. National highway network has almost doubled in the past decade from around 90,000 kilometers in 2013-14 to about 1.5 lakh kilometers. The number of airports has gone up from 74 to 160 during the same period. Metro coverage expanded from 5 cities to 424. And India now has the third largest metro network in the world. And whoever I meet, they all testify to the fact that the experience of travel in India, whether by rail or road or air, has changed qualitatively. One can therefore say that when Prime Minister made this announcement, it was that an inflection point had been reached. A takeoff stage had arrived. But then, without an ambitious, long-term, overarching vision, strategies and actions of ministries and central and state governments were bound to remain uncoordinated, lacking coherence, and lacking the scale required to transform the nation's destiny. Ministries needed to be brought together to strategize collectively and to act in tandem, in concert. State governments also needed to be brought on board for this national endeavor. The Prime Minister meant business, and therefore, soon after his 2022 Independence Day address, 10 sectoral groups of secretaries were tasked to prepare visions and targets for their sectors, and I had the occasion, the privilege, or the opportunity to oversee this exercise. And these groups were specifically told not to be constrained in their thinking, by the existing paradigms, and think bold and suggest specific initiatives and measures, institutional reforms, structural reforms required to realize those visions. And they held countless number of meetings. In fact, these were all documented, and I can tell you that over 2,200 meetings were held, and over 3.35 lakhs stakeholders were consulted. Examples of such exercises by other countries were studied, and global best practices and benchmarks were examined. And in response to a call by the Prime Minister, youth from over 1,000 universities contributed ideas. More than 10 lakh responses were received, which were analyzed using AI tools, and reports prepared by these groups were then consolidated into a unified vision. And on 3rd March 2024, the Prime Minister, along with the entire Council of Ministers, not just the Cabinet, reviewed this through day-long series of presentations. And thereafter, 5-year action plans were prepared by the sectoral groups and by individual ministries, which are currently under implementation. So colossal amount of preparation has thus been gone into. And to impart fresh momentum to this effort, a high-level committee has been set up, which Dr. Gupta mentioned in his introduction, on 19th August this year. And this committee is tasked to provide strategic guidance to the ministries in this effort. And a second high-level committee on regulatory reforms was simultaneously constituted, which has been mandated to develop. I'm using the exact words used in the notification. A modern, flexible, people-friendly, and trust-based regulatory framework appropriate for 21st century, signaling the urgency attached by government to next generation reforms. So achieving Viksit Bharat vision would require taking our economy from current level of about 4 trillion US dollars to 30 to 35 trillion dollars. We need sustained annual growth of 7.5 to 8% in real GDP terms. And if you ask me, then this is the foremost governance challenge. Besides the strong foundation that has been laid, we have demographics in our favor. With 65% of our population under 35, we are undoubtedly the youngest, at least among the large countries, if not amongst all. India's median age today is about 29. It's nearly 40 in China and 50 in Japan. So that is the kind of difference that exists. However, in order to reap this advantage, we need to create employment opportunities on a massive, massive scale and equip our youth with quality education and appropriate skilling. Without this, the demographic dividend could turn into a liability. So this is the second formidable challenge, that is growth with employment. The third thing, that our HDI rank, which is currently 130, should rise. And we should be among the top 25 to 30 in the world by 2047. Because Viksit Bharat is not only about GDP and per capita income, it's equally about quality of life. Viksit Bharat envisions universal access to affordable and quality healthcare. Infant mortality rate should decline to less than 2 from 28 per 1,000 live births. The gross enrollment ratio for higher education should increase from 27 to 60. These are the numbers which are there in the visions of the sectoral groups. These indicators have, of course, improved significantly in the last 10 years, but we have a long way to go. And then there are huge interstate disparities. Fourth challenge is about infrastructure, which has improved hugely, but I think it should be comparable to the best in the world in scale as well as in quality. And in all fields, our institutions, some of our universities, our companies should be among top 10, top 20, etc. Now, so these are, I think, the four major challenges as I see. But is this doable? History shows, that nations can dramatically change their history. The Meiji Restoration in 1860s and 70s stands out as one of the most remarkable episodes of rapid modernization, economic growth. Japan again transformed from post-war devastation to become world's second largest economy within 3 decades, increasing its GDP per capita from, I think, $500 in 1960 to over 30,000 by 1990. South Korea's GDP per capita increased from about $160 in 1960 to 6,600 in 1960 and over 34,000 today. China's story is even more dramatic. Its per capita income has grown from less than $300 in 1985 to over $13,500. So what is particularly instructive is the speed of these transformations. In each case, it just took 25 to 30 years. So other countries have done it. We have reached an inflection point. It is doable. I would refer, to the Nobel Prize last year for economics to Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson for their work that rise and fall of nations is shaped by institutions and policies they adopt. And they have documented several examples of this in their seminal book, Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty. One of the more striking examples of the power of governance and policy choices is the divergence today between North Korea and South Korea. I mean, starting from identical circumstances in 1953, same people, same culture, same geography. South Korea's per capita GDP today is nearly 60 times that of North America. A critical ingredient for such transformations is a sense of national purpose and belief. Every worker, every entrepreneur, every civil servant, every citizen must believe that this is achievable and must work towards this goal. Center and states should work in partnership. And from states, this spirit should extend to districts and cities. It is encouraging to see that following Prime Minister's exhortation, industry, civil society, and state governments have bought into this vision. So, what we need now is a shift in our grammar of governance. Old frameworks will not suffice. First, we have to equip our systems, our ministries, departments, organizations, public sector, private companies to think beyond incremental improvements and undertake strategic, long term thinking and conceptualize and implement transformational reforms. Two, we have to embrace trust based governance. Three, we have to get central, state, and city governments out of doing business themselves. Four, we need state governments and cities to make growth and job creation their number one priority. Five, we need to improve state effectiveness, that is, improve the quality of basic governance, quality of service delivery, and speed of decision making. Become result oriented and not process obsessed. And six, we need an overhaul of urban governance. So on strategic thinking, I recall, why India is not a great power yet. As many of you, I'm sure, know, this is the title of a book by Bharat. The root cause, according to him, is absence of bold vision and strategic. Now, that book is more about hard power capabilities. But hard power also, we must remember, is to a great degree a function of economic strength. Prime Minister's vision of Viksit Bharat, replacement of Planning Commission with NITI Aayog, institutionalization of the sectoral group of secretaries for long-term strategic planning. These are all significant steps to address this deficit in our system, of long-term thinking and visioning. And with the support of the central government and NITI, 25 states and UTs have also set up NITI-type institutions, and 6 more are in the process of being operationalized. So one can say, that we are beginning to get there on this point. For too long, our regulatory frameworks have remained predicated on the colonial premise of distrust, creating elaborate mechanisms of control that stifle enterprise and innovation. We need a clean break from this mindset to trust-based governance, which views citizens as partners. And that is my second point. Prime Minister once said that the industry, I quote, the industry of red tape thrives on doubt, and the road with the red carpet is built on trust. And for misdeeds of a small number, we cannot punish everyone. Unquote. A comprehensive exercise of deregulation and decriminalization is an absolute imperative for unleashing the creative spirit of citizens and businesses. A great deal of work has already been done in this regard, and since 2014, ease of doing business and ease of living have become mainstream initiatives across the government, and more than 42,000 unnecessary compliances have either been removed or simplified. However, this remains an unfinished business. Many regulatory requirements are excessive. They are even beyond sometimes global norms. Our firms, businesses, and citizens are still shackled with excessive and often irrational requirements of licenses, frequent renewals, record keeping, and repeated inspections, creating opportunities for rent seeking and harassment. MSMEs, for example, they are the backbone of the economy, contributing around 31% of GDP and 45% of our exports. Given their size, they face disproportionately high regulatory burden and costs in terms of consent to establish, consent to operate, mandatory appointment of auditors, frequency of board meetings, corporate social responsibility, and so on. Consequently, there is a disincentive to grow, to formalize, to graduate from micro to small and small to medium. GST registration, there has been a lot of further reform recently, but even today, registration is required in every state separately for all businesses, small and big. Industrial estates have a minimum green cover requirement of 33%, more than 3 times the 10% standard in EU, in Brazil, in Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia. So for the same level of production, an industrial unit in India requires 40% more land. Obviously, it translates to more cost and impacts competitiveness. Our coastal zone regulations restrict developmental activities in 500 meters from the high tide line. In most countries, this is 50 meters or at most 100 meters. They leverage their costs for tourism and livelihood opportunities much better than we do. Numerous such examples exist across sectors, and we must realize that every additional day of waiting for approvals, every redundant inspection, every unnecessary document requirement translates into real costs and increased disabilities for our firms, decreasing their competitiveness in the global market. So now we need to go beyond compliance reduction. We need to think of the cost of doing business and the cost of regulation. We introduce regulations. What is the cost of actually implementing vis-a-vis the benefit that we derive from them? Now, in order to institutionalize this approach, the high-level committee is developing a framework based on first principles that can serve as a guidance for ministries, against which to benchmark their current and future regulations. Licenses, for example, should be required only for high-risk activities, and they should have perpetual validity or at least longer-term validity. And self-registration should be the default option. Third-party certification should be the norm, not inspections by the officials of agencies and pollution control boards and so on. Inspection should be risk-based, computer-aided, and not routine. Adequate implementation timeline should be mandatory before new regulations kick in, and they shouldn't be introduced, suddenly. On decriminalization, a landmark piece of legislation came into effect on 11th August 2023, called the Jan Vishwas Act. In one stroke, 183 provisions across 42 central acts were decriminalized, replacing, the threat of jail time and criminal fines with civil penalties for relatively minor and non-malicious errors, violations, or oversights. For instance, under the Indian Forest Act 1927, grazing cattle on forest land could land a tribal or a non-tribal forest dweller in jail. Environment Protection Act 1986 had imprisonment clauses for failure to assist pollution control board officers in their inspections. There are several such examples. Now, following the first Jan Vishwas Act, the second edition has been tabled in Parliament, which seeks to decriminalize 288 provisions across 16 acts. Many other acts like Companies Act, Legal Metrology Act were separately put through a comprehensive decriminalization exercise, and more than 3,700 provisions have been decriminalized. However, this again is an unfinished task. Even today, out of 882 union laws, 370 have such criminal provisions, criminalizing 7,305 actions and omissions. Out of these, only about 1/4 relate to public health or security or human life. Goes without saying that all violations cannot be decriminalized. Serious violations must entail a severe. However, non-serious violations can be dealt with in a different non-criminal fashion. So we are going through this exercise ministry by ministry, act by act. I said that even today there are a large number of such provisions which exist. There are omnibus provisions, which say, for example, that in the Metro Act, that contravention of any provision of the Act or any rule made thereunder for which no other penalties elsewhere provided is punishable with imprisonment up to 3 months. Under Coastal Shipping Act, any licensee or agent to whom a notice has been served and who fails to furnish information required within the time specified can be imprisoned up to 6 months. So we are now applying a principle that jail time should be reserved for serious offenses involving national security or serious risks to health or human life, and penalties should be proportionate and corrective. The spirit of Jan Vishwas must permeate every level of governance. A significant proportion of regulatory burden, compliances, and criminal provisions is at the state level. State laws account for 4 out of 5 compliances with imprisonment terms, but it's encouraging to note, that following the initiative of the central government, state governments are following suit and are now working, many of them are working on their own versions of Jan Vishwas Act. One can say, that the path to Viksit Bharat will be paved with regulatory liberation, freeing citizens to concentrate their energies on innovation and enterprise. My third point is about, getting government out of business. I'm not, talking of the challenges which are in the domain of national security or geopolitical developments. My conversation today is more about the domestic governance reform agenda. So my third point is about getting government out of business. There is need to redefine government's role from being a direct provider of services and producer of goods to a strategic enabler and regulator. Government should focus on core sovereign functions, that is public goods, rule of law, national security, education, health and social protection. Government's presence is not necessary in sectors where market-based delivery models are more efficient. The transformation of defense and space sectors, which Dr. Gupta mentioned in his introduction, exemplifies, what is possible. Private sector defense industry could not develop in India earlier because defense platforms and arms and ammunition, even socks and shoes, were reserved for PSUs or Ordnance Factory Board, which was run not even as a PSU, but as a government department. I mean, we did not allow our own private sector to come up and do manufacturing of defense equipments, but all the equipment that we were buying from abroad mostly came from the private sector in those countries. So that has changed now, and private sector is now making, we can see, advanced defense platforms, missiles and howitzers. During last 10 years, defense exports have increased 30 times. Space sector has been opened up, and so we are seeing a proliferation of space startups, and they are making rockets and satellites and developing satellite-based services, and this is one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy today. So we need, therefore, to examine whether we require the presence of government in commercial activities in other sectors, including in the so-called strategic sectors. When we see in different ministries, departments, the stock argument against bringing private sector is to say that we are a strategic sector. I think we should see how similar sectors are operated in other major countries or developed countries. And then there is considerable scope for similar reforms in the states. When we started service, and even today, many states have, they have a proliferation of corporations, from film development corporation, all you name it, and most states have vegetable development corporation, fruit development corporation, and then there are large number of autonomous bodies. These need to be rationalized, and states also need to undertake monetization of assets and leverage PPP in the cities, in the municipal corporations. This will free up resources for public investment in infrastructure and social sector, and improve the quality of services through private sector efficiencies. India is a country of continental dimensions. Many of our states and even districts are bigger than countries. UP would be the 5th or 6th most populous if it was a country. Odisha, where I went recently when they presented their vision for Viksit Odisha, and I noted that with 1.55 lakh square kilometers area, Odisha is larger than South Korea, and its population of 4.7 crore exceeds that of Canada. There are at least 100 countries smaller in area than districts like Kutch, Leh, and Jaisalmer. Thane, Mumbai suburban, Bengaluru, North 24 Parganas, they have population larger than 140 countries. India cannot become a developed nation unless every state joins this endeavor. So my fourth point is that our states need to think and plan like countries. The theme of the Governing Council meeting of NITI Aayog this year, 24th May, was appropriately Viksit Rajya for Viksit Bharat. It is heartening to note that states are now working to develop their own vision documents and action plans to make their states developed by 2047 in sync with the Viksit Bharat vision. 12 states and UTs have already done so. They have completed this exercise. Factor markets like land and labor, they lie in the domain of the states. So the next generation reforms also have to come from states. They need to institutionalize long-term visioning and strategic thinking. And as I mentioned earlier, many of them have set up NITI type institutions. They need to give priority to creating facilitative policy and regulatory environment to attract investments. And they also need to embrace fiscal discipline. That is an essential part of long-term visioning and thinking. Several globally respected commentators and our own experts have observed, have acknowledged that Indian state does a remarkable job of managing crisis situations, or when things have to be done in a mission mode under tight time deadlines, like conducting elections or holding globally unique events like Kumbh Mela or running COVID vaccination drive. However, we must also acknowledge that we struggle to deliver basic services on a regular basis in areas like health, nutrition, public safety, and justice, which are essential for citizens' well-being and are also key contributors of productivity and economic growth. Weak delivery, weak public service delivery disproportionately impacts the poor and vulnerable, who have no choice but to rely on public services. So enhancing state effectiveness, that is my fifth point, particularly at the cutting edge, at the service delivery level in the districts and cities, is crucial for improving our human development index and for stimulating economic growth. So we should therefore focus more on upgrading implementation capabilities in the field. We need redeployment of workforce in the states. We need more teachers and health workers. We need to focus more on improving technical knowledge and behavioral skills of officers at the cutting edge, and also give greater autonomy to them in their work and leverage private sector capabilities wherever possible. State effectiveness also means proactive and speedy decision making at all levels, in the districts, in the states, and in the central government. This is vital for meeting citizens' expectations and fostering economic growth. We should benchmark ourselves against the best in the world. Take, for example, the FDI approvals, wherever approvals are still required. We have set ourselves a timeline of 60 days. Often it takes longer. But there are countries like Singapore, UAE, Vietnam, which take a week or 15 days to do so. As in my last job, I had asked the Department of Administrative Reforms to undertake a third-party study of the levels through which files pass before a decision gets taken. And we found that in many ministries, files pass through 6, 7, even 9 levels: dealing hand, ASO, section officer, under secretary, deputy secretary, joint secretary, additional secretary, secretary. Additional levels do not add value, but they definitely lead to delays and diffused accountability. There are standing instructions that decision making should not involve more than 4 levels. However, while there has been a lot of improvement because of persistent reviews, a lot of work remains to be done. We require a serious effort at delegation and decentralization, and we need flatter organizational structures. What I have, noted and commented often to my colleagues is, that when you talk of delegation, and everybody loves delegation, but only up to their level. They do not wish to delegate further. I think we have to shed this approach. Good governance or state effectiveness will also need diverse expertise and lateral entry of domain experts into government. It should be welcomed as an opportunity. And it is not meant to be only for the ministries. In all organizations, even security organizations, the cutting edge knowledge, talent in cyber security, for example, this is not available, cannot be inside the government. So we have to take advantage of the talent which is available outside and introduce competition. My last point is about urbanization. It is one of the most dynamic forces shaping our future, presenting at once huge challenges and an unprecedented opportunity. With only 37% of our population in cities, we have been slow to urbanize. The level of urbanization in most countries in all continents is more than 80%, even more than 90%. In US, Brazil, Japan, Argentina, France, UK, they all have 80 to 90% urbanization. But now it is rapidly changing in India. By 2050, we will be 50% urban, with 85 crore people living in cities, up from 54 crore at present. Cities, as we know, is where talent and capital converge, where innovation and enterprise converge. And therefore, they are the engines of growth. They are the crucibles of economic growth. Realizing Viksit Bharat will depend on our ability to harness the potential of our cities. Now, we had well-planned cities even during the Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Lothal, well-planned cities. And we had thriving urban centers like Pataliputra and Ujjain and Mathura in ancient and medieval India. Post-independence, however, in our development paradigm, in our development priorities, cities suffered from relative neglect, resulting in stagnant or even decaying infrastructure and weak service delivery. Migration from villages to cities was seen as a failure of state planning. Post 2014, there has been a paradigm shift. several large urban missions have been launched, like smart cities, Amrut, Swachh Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Urban, National Urban Livelihoods Mission. This year's budget has announced an Urban Challenge Fund, aiming to channel rupees 4 lakh crores to support cities as growth hubs, marking a shift to reforms and performance-based funding. However, there are basic institutional and structural challenges in urban governance that need to be addressed, and that is something which the states have to do. Despite the 74th Constitution Amendment devolving 18 functions to urban local bodies, in practice, states have given real control of only 3 functions to the urban local. Basically, only sanitation. Everything else remains under the control of the state government, urban development department, or their agencies or parastatals reporting directly to the state government. Even planning remains outside the purview of the elected urban local body, development authorities, and so on. Now, as per World Bank estimates and various other estimates, we require humongous amounts of money, 70 lakh crores by one estimate, for addressing our urban infrastructure deficit and to cater to the additional requirement for those who are joining the cities over the next 15 years. But our municipal revenues have stagnated at 1% of GDP, which is far below international standards of 7 to 14%. Property taxes are low and they are not collected. They are far short of potential. User charges are not levied. So we need to steer the states to undertake basic governance reforms and to create truly empowered city government, have directly elected mayors with 5-year terms. Because in many states today, the mayors are elected for 1 year or 2 years, and they are elected indirectly. So often you don't know who the mayor is or who is going to be the mayor when you go to cast your vote in the municipal elections. And as mandated by Constitution, the State Finance Commission should ensure adequate fiscal transfers from states to cities, just as the Finance Commission here does from the center to the states. And cities in turn must improve their property tax collections and adopt innovative value capture financing tools and tap the municipal bond market. Urban planning also has remained regulation focused. A new planning paradigm is required, moving from restrictive zonal classifications, single use, low rise to economic planning, mixed use, and densification around mass transit. And what we can do, we should leverage the funding under urban missions to get the states to implement these vital reforms. So in conclusion, I will say that while challenges are formidable, opportunities are equally immense. Every regulation reformed, every service delivery improved, every city empowered will bring us closer to Viksit Bharat. GDP targets and infrastructure creation will follow with relative ease if we succeed in reimagining governance from control to trust, from process to outcomes, from incremental to transformation. Good news is that there is today, one can see, unprecedented sense of purpose, which is visible. Reforms have gained traction, even in the states. So thank you for this opportunity.
So friends, you heard from Shri Rajiv Gauba how our journey to Viksit Bharat 47 is being conceptualized. And I think some very telling points were made by Shri Gauba. I think a framework is already in place, and he outlined uh, several key features of that framework that has been thought through. This is going from some of these are like trust-based regulation or getting government out of the business and enhancing state effectiveness, and also several reforms of the urbanization process. So these are very, very important issues. And as he also mentioned, that the NEEV foundation of this 2047 journey is already there. But today we are going into several new areas, and the states will play a very important role. I think local governance bodies, they need to be strengthened. One thing is to have a central government saying something, some scheme, etc., but how do you implement it? And on the urbanization, there are, I think, while this process is gaining ground, but there are huge problems. I mean, simple things like even cleaning the streets. Today we are not able to do it. And as you said about out of the 18 functions, only one has been left to them, that is sanitary cleaning. And even that is not done properly. And in a place like Delhi, we are seeing a lot of debate on pollution, Yamuna, and all that is there. So I think the ordinary citizen wants to see his life improved, and in the very basic services that which you mentioned. So we'll just open it for some Q&A and discussions. And ladies and gentlemen, there wishes to ask a question. Yeah, I'll come.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gauba, I'm Pradeep Mehta. Mr. Gauba, I'm Pradeep Mehta, a public policy advocate. Just two questions to you, sharp. One is, are you considering the institutionalization of the regulatory impact assessment, which has been mentioned by several government committees? If you want to improve regulatory reforms, then the first thing is to see when you say cost benefit. It's a tool. Secondly, what I would like to know is you're thinking of one of the very big problems is the lack of accountability. How can you change that? Are you suggesting any changes in the lack of accountability as to how to improve accountability? Thank you.
Let's take a few questions and then Yogi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honorable Mr. Gauba. I mean, listening from you, I mean, who obviously understands the minutiae of the challenges, governance challenges for Viksit Bharat. I have basically one question, and one thing, in fact, I just want to mention about urbanization. Perhaps I'm sure I'll get your email and send to you a 1,500-word simple note that I wrote on urbanization and infrastructure policy, and I think where it's leading us. My basic question really is this, that when you talk about improving governance, I feel that the government and the thinkers and policy planners need to front load what you're thinking of doing at a later stage. Two things. One is judicial administration and the efficacy of regulatory mechanism that you're talking about. If the regulatory mechanism is not effective, what actually happens, the more you liberalize, the more these nexus develop, whether it's business, politics or business, civil servant, and so on and so forth. There's so many of these things. So unless we can do that, we are actually finding ourselves, or we might find ourselves in a situation like many of these, what you call middle income or lower middle income countries, which are trapped there because they regulatory mechanism very, very low, very poor. And I'll just give two examples. One is here, these newspapers are full of this. There was a report, I think about yesterday I read, that in Delhi, I think about 23 universities are illegal. And they say they can't enforce it. They are working without license. They can't enforce it because enforcement process is so cumbersome, so circular, that people are getting cheated by that. spending their money, and at the end of the year that they spend there, they get nothing out of it. The other example I'll give you is a small one. The case where there was this short circuit in that coaching institute, and the police fired FIR against somebody who actually was driving his vehicle, which was not prohibited, in a flooded street, and they blamed that person for flooding the basement. And the FIR was lodged against the man, was arrested. Now, what accountability is there on the part of the police? What accountability on the part of the municipal authorities, for which you don't require any additional instruments of coercion? But the fact is that, this is the state of enforcing our regulatory mechanisms. I think we'll find much more of these inequalities developing. Income inequality, urban-rural inequality. Thank you.
This lady there.
Namaste Gupta sir, Namaste Gauba sir. Sir, a very light-hearted question. What do you think are the cognitive and the psychological challenges to building a Viksit Bharat in 2047?
Okay, let's take 3 questions and then we'll stop.
On the urban, what I was trying to say, you look at New York or London, you have a mayor who all the agencies are under the municipal body and the mayor, including the police. The police commissioner reports to the mayor. What we have, and that is primarily because the states have not been agreeable to transfer power to the city level. So we have, what Dr. Gupta also mentioned in his remarks. There is fragmentation of authority. Delhi is an extreme example. So you have the Delhi Development Authority, which prepares the master plan. It is not with the municipal corporation. You have water supply with the Jal Board, whether it is UP Jal Board or all states, the Delhi Jal Board. So the quality of leadership also in the cities. The former mayor of London went on to become the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. You had people like Rudy Giuliani and all the mayors of New York. We don't have, because the city government or the municipal corporation is not truly empowered, and therefore there is the responsibility is also diffused, and that is why you have situations like what was mentioned here, the unfortunate incident in the coaching institution. Cities are huge, they are big in terms of population. So you need a truly empowered city government, because these things can't be run from state capital or the national capital. On the whole ease of doing business issue and regulatory impact assessment, Mr. Mehta's question is the next step. We started with ease of doing business initiative. Okay, you identify different areas of business and the acts and regulations there, the processes there, and try and improve them. Then we had a competition among states, and so this whole thing acquired momentum. The regulatory impact assessment is the next stage. So we have to develop the mechanism for that. We have to develop the tools for that. And only then we can introduce it and mandate it for all future or prospective regulation. So that is a work in progress. It is being done by the DPIIT. Now, accountability, you mentioned, so I think there are mechanisms of accountability in the central government, in the states. It's not that accountability is not there. Sometimes, in fact, you hear the opposite thing, that officials get penalized for even bona fide mistakes or errors of judgment. So, well, it is a complex issue. Accountability has to be enforced. There are powers available with the state government or the central government if somebody doesn't perform. Well, we have, and in terms of only accountability, one aspect is penalizing for non-performance or doing something which is wrong. The other aspect of accountability is, ensuring that people deliver as per the targets given to them, etc. So that requires working out a framework, of contracts, etc., which many countries have done, which has been thought about here. It was experimented with in Government of India. The ministries used to prepare, the result framework document. That exercise used to be undertaken at the beginning of the year. And then they used to be evaluated against that. And there was a proposal that some amount of compensation should be linked to performance. But that, in government and public sector is not easy. Public sector it is being done, incidentally. Many of us may not be aware that in public sector, a part of the compensation of the CMDs and directors depends on performance. It's a very complex matrix, and there is a yearly review and compensation. So there are, it's not that, I don't think we have a lack of accountability, but we need to refine or improve upon these instruments. On the university question, I am not aware, which universities, maybe some are operating without approval, etc. But I have a different, take on this thing. You see, when we had COVID, we had to evacuate Indian nationals from foreign countries. And I remember January 2020, when we started having our, Committee of Secretaries meeting to deal with the evolving situation and imposing restrictions on flights, etc. The first batch of Indians whom we had to evacuate were our medical students in Wuhan. And then after a couple of years in 2022, I think when the Russia-Ukraine thing happened, again we were evacuating Indian students studying medicine in Ukraine. So what has happened in our education system is, again, that we have not been able to create capacities, increase capacities in the public sector. And because of our excessively stringent regulations, we have not allowed the private sector also to come up. Given our, the scale of requirement, we need both. We need to increase capacities in the public sector, the state universities, the government universities, and also allow private sector to come up. But our norms and regulations in medical, for example, and others also in terms of, the land requirement, we still have those archaic requirements of 100 acres or 40 acres, and you can't have faculty on contract, so on and so forth. So sometimes, and because there is unmet demand and regulations are so stringent, so you have also this phenomenon, of people operating below outside the pale of law. So I think we need to look at it holistically. We have the potential to become not only cater to our own requirement, and our students are middle class students having to go abroad in large numbers. There is no harm in people going abroad if they want to, but we should not have a situation where our students, our children have to go abroad because no choice is available this time. We can actually become a hub of higher education for developing countries, for neighboring countries, and there can be economic benefits from that also. So I think we need to look at this higher education sector from that angle.
एक बात बताइए, you mentioned about the fragmentation of authority in Delhi. Now, this is something that has been talked about for a very, very long time. Or for that matter, you talked about the universities and the need to make India as an educational hub. And also some lot of hanky-panky which goes on in the universities, etc. Now, these problems are known. Now, when a senior civil servant sitting in the government reads about this in a newspaper, what is his first reaction?
Well, the first reaction is the same as that of any citizen of the country. You feel that, why things are wrong and why we have not been able to fix them. But you yourself have been part of the system, government. The decision making is not in the hands of one person. There are processes, there are, consultations required. There are levels at which these things have to be approved. There are center-state issues. Some things are in the domain of the state, some in the domain of the central government. So yes, and as I said, we need to be much more agile in our decision making. No doubt, a lot of things have improved. A lot of
प्रधानमंत्री जी कुछ बोलते होंगे भाई, देखिए अखबारों में आ रहा है, let's do something.
बिल्कुल कहते हैं, और इसीलिए the national education policy was a product of these concerns.
चलिए, मुझे actually there are too many hands, I can't keep track of all of them. Let me start with here, and then maybe Sanjay and then Ashok. These three, and then we'll go. Kindly make it brief.
Thank you.
So that we can move.
Thank you, sir. My name is Nalin Kohli. I represent a small and medium industry association. So we feel the brunt of regulatory burden all the time. Sir, I have very quickly 2 points to make. Some changes are like you are mentioning at a micro level, decriminalization, you go through the act. But there have been what you can call systemic changes, which bring about a bigger relief. Just for example, sir, we used to have the import policy, import licenses. Then we did a big reform.
Brief रखिएगा, please.
We said there is a negative list, everything else can be imported. So, sir, that's one point, that if we can give you suggestions on systemic reforms, which would have a much bigger impact. Second point, sir, which I would like to mention. So on the import policy, if you recall, we used to have Appendix 3, and the industry every time used to come to the government, please take this item off Appendix 3, put it onto OGL. Finally, we, a recommendation which we had been making, that have a small negative list, balance everything is allowed for free imports. So that had a huge impact. So my second point is, while you are looking at the previous regulations, new regulations are being added. Just to give you an example, quality control order. We recently had a meeting, and NITI Aayog also was represented there. And we said, why should you have quality control orders for intermediate products and raw materials when you're having it on the final product? So what I'm saying is that while you're looking at the past, many new regulations are being added where it should be filtered right in the beginning. Thank you.
I'll come to you.
So my name is Sanjay Kumar Verma. I used to be a whip earlier. 3-part question. So one, is there any incentive in the entire policy framework to fail? Most of the countries, as you mentioned, Japan, China, Canada, Vietnam, all of them had a policy to incentivize failure, that the bureaucrats should think out of box. If they fail, that should not be penalized. So is that there? That is one. Secondly, sir, you talked about the decriminalization of future offenses. what happens to those offenses which have already been criminalized, are petty in nature and is still pending in the court of law. So judiciary governance is very important. Third one, sir, the skills which you mentioned. We are abysmally poor in skill creation. Whereas China creates 32 million formal graduates from their skilling centers, we create 1.8 million. Workforce are similar. So any thoughts on that? And finally, sir, for our own ilk, the cutting edge is what people see. People see constables, sub-inspectors, inspectors. They don't see the DGP. Whereas the policy making is largely concentrated in the top echelon. And what I see after my retirement, that they are not being translated down below to the cutting edge. How do you want to do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rajiv, for this very excellent presentation, very detailed, comprehensive. And I think it's really good to know that so much has been done, and so much is happening in terms of reaching our target or objective in 2047. You know, since time is limited, let me limit myself to just one question. You know, we've been talking about what is possible under the current circumstances. Have we given some thought as to how technology can be used in terms of getting a governance? You know, we've been talking about ease of living, ease of doing business. And of course, we know that, you know, what the world was 3 years ago, it is not today. And definitely the world is not going to be the same. So are any instrumentalities being created in terms of harnessing technology for improving governance? Thank you.
Okay, so on MSMEs, yes, you know, I acknowledge the fact that MSMEs bear a disproportionate burden because they're smaller, and for them the compliance cost is proportionately higher, and therefore MSMEs are receiving attention of the government, the ministry, NITI Aayog, and a number of measures to improve compliance situation for them are on the anvil. Many states have also been encouraged to do so. Many states have exempted MSMEs for the first 3 years, etc., etc. Ministry of Environment, their consent to establish, consent to operate. Some have exempted. MSMEs are being treated on a separate footing. The QCO that you mentioned, the quality control orders. Now, quality control orders are issued by the individual ministries, as you know. Basically, what does it mean? It means that a standard becomes mandatory. Standards are prepared by BIS, which was earlier ISI, we all know. And they are supposed to be, in general, voluntary. Consumer has to decide whether he or she would like to buy a product which is ISI or not. In some cases, they need to be made mandate where they impact, you know, safety. Some electrical devices, you know, if they are not mandatory, people are selling without that certification, they can lead to a hazard or accident result. That is the general principle. However, you know, we all also know that we live in the real world. There are countries which have taken a number of, several countries which have adopted so-called non-tariff barriers. So QCOs is one way of ensuring that we don't become a dumping ground for cheap substandard products from abroad. That said, we need to be more selective and rational And we have to make sure, sometimes the ministries may go overboard and they have notified QCOs which are actually turning out to be counterproductive because the cost is going up of having to get inspections done, or every component also, or intermediate product or raw material becoming subject to QCO. So there is need for rationalization that everyone, I think, would agree, and that is being attended to. That is all that I can say. I think the incentive to fail, we do not have, and that is how, that is what I mean when we say that governance paradigm needs to change. This is something we should have. We have traditionally worked on the principle, that all violations, any act of, where you are found wanting, you get penalized. Even bona fide mistakes get people into trouble, sometimes years after they have limited office. That how to bring that about in the work of the government is a challenge. It's easier said than done. I don't know how well, but overall, I would say, having worked for long years now, particularly in my last job, that today there is much greater incentive to perform in the company. Earlier, our generation of civil servants, when we started work, and for many years thereafter, we did not have that sort of mindset. That ecosystem was not. So you were basically implementing, schemes and programs as they were given, and you were content to meet the targets. Today's officers, and I've seen many of them, several batches, they are more technology savvy, and they are more, socially aware across all services. And the way our governance paradigm has evolved, and including the encouragement and motivation from the top, from the Prime Minister himself, there is an incentive to innovate. And there are, earlier we never had the Prime Minister's Awards, for example. This is one example. So many of these things have contributed to a climate today where a lot of innovation and experimentation is happening in the field, in the ministries. So, but yes, there is no formal, that sort of structure. Retrospective, what we have managed to do, we must, also acknowledge that this was never attempted earlier. So decriminalization of provisions across the board in so many laws is not a mean achievement. And initially we did that with different ministries like companies, corporate affairs ministry, companies law, then legal metrology, Environment Protection Act. And then this idea came, and it was the Prime Minister's idea that, individual ministries are coming, it is taking time, let us do it all at one go. And so one bill, that's not normally done, that so many ministries, so many acts, they would normally come with their own amendment act. So all were put together in one act. And now the second edition, as I mentioned, same thing is now being done in the states. But to apply retrospectively may not perhaps stand the scrutiny of courts. It was discussed, so that we could not do. Skilling did not receive the importance or the attention that it deserved earlier. We now have a separate ministry and organizations like Skill Development Corporation, national level. There are several institutions which have been set up, but here, industry also keeps complaining that there are not enough skilled personnel, and people are moving from one job to the other, etc. I have, in my recent conversations with the industry, also felt and observed, that if the industry needs skilled manpower, what is preventing them also from coming together and setting up institutions for skilling? Because it's not for the government alone. Government has this huge network of polytechnics and ITIs, and now private sector institutions dedicated to skilling, where these programs are being run. We need to do a much better job of this. No doubt, I agree with you. Well, cutting edge, yes, that is what that the behavioral skills, police station or the staff of the municipal bodies or the collectorate staff with whom people have to deal on a day-to-day basis, their conduct vis-a-vis citizens certainly needs to improve. There, this again it is the leadership of these organizations which has to take this responsibility and to inculcate this in the people at the cutting edge, that, and also give them a sense of importance. This is what is being now propagated, told, that every person in the any department must understand, realize that they have an important role to play in the overall scheme of things. How they deal with the citizen, how they deal with the person who's coming to do business, that will determine whether that person actually sets up his shop here or not. So, and some work in this regard is being done under the Karma Yogi platforms, because training on and also on soft skills on such a large scale in physical setting is will require huge amount of resources. We are not able to do regular training even for senior civil servants because the number of institutions is limited, capacities are limited. So this technology platform, and that is again use of technology in governance, that where large number of now modules are available and people are getting training, improving their technical knowledge as well as behavioral skills. So that is happening, and a lot of things are. Somebody said, one of you, that so much is happening. Government does not do a very good job of communicating the positive things that are happening. So a lot of these changes of things are happening, and so far as use of technology, I think the use of technology in government has increased phenomenally in the last 15-20 years. Since the National E-Governance Plan, under which the MEA, for example, the passport has become so easy. We have electronic visa for more than 160 countries. All the filings today are by digital method, our digital public infrastructure. So I think use of technology in government, that is something, one area where we can justifiably be proud of it as compared to many other countries. But here again, there is a lot more that needs to be done. Many of our websites of the government need to be better. They need to be more user friendly, but many are quite state of the art also. So I think there we have done a good job, and now AI, etc. Government has set up a mission. So use of AI in the government also is being, the use cases are being developed to improve the service delivery also.
It's 4:30 now. To extend it a little bit. I have 2%. Okay. Please.
Dr. Pravesh Khanna. Dr. Pravesh Khanna. Supreme Court law. Government is providing free ration to more than 10% population of India. What the government doing for the upgradation of these people so that they will be part of Viksit Bharat will do portion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, I'm Dr. Raghuvansh, a former journalist. I want to refocus your attention on something which you just mentioned in passing, the imbalance in regional development of states. So asking states to compete with each other, say for example, Bihar, which is quite backward, a state which you know very well. Yeah. So what can be done to somehow pull these states together? So give us some what the government is doing or some out of the box solution to this problem.
Thank you, sir. I'm a professor in the university. I'm a voice of the young people. What I feel in the class that I teach environmental science. We just talked about Environmental Protection Act. We teach them the Policies Act when they are motivated going to the ground to do the job. Exactly what you told, that they're facing the trouble of accesses to the administration. So my request to the thing that what we feel that the national, that's like one example I have to cite here. When you're approaching to Jharkhand with National Highway Authority, just for the cutting of tree, they immediately helped us. But once we are doing in the Delhi government, that problem is happening because the local bodies, urban local bodies are not very much coordinated. So we can't do anything knowing the problem, just like a falling of tree and killing of the person. So I think we have to do some health disaster management in the urban local bodies. Those are doing for action plan. Thank you, sir.
Lady there, you raise your hands.
Very good evening, sir. I'm Priyanshu from Keshav Mahavidyalaya. My question is, as we are all know, we are from the we known to be the Krishi Pradhan Desh, and we have the large area in the rural parts. So, what are the steps taken by the government to improve the rural areas? Because there's a lot of places in the rural area they don't have the basic needs like education. In the government school, there's just a lot of the teachers they don't know the basic spellings or anything. But so my question is, what are the steps taken by the government for the education corruption in the rural areas, and what are the steps to develop the rural area?
Rural areas, there.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. I am Raj Kamal Bindal. Sir, my question is whether for improved governance or better governance, whether the government of India is planning to prepare the financial statements. That is to know how much is the total revenue of the government, how much of the central government vis-a-vis all the state governments, total expenditure of the governments, whether the governments, respective governments are in surplus or deficit, what are the total assets or total liabilities. This will put a restraint on the capability of the political parties to declare the freebies.
Good evening, sir. I'm Rajesh Malhotra. Thank you for your talk. I think three things which are kind of always overstated, but आपने explosion आपको so many insulin disciplines. Population हमारी इतनी ज़्यादा with this, demographic dividend. One of the great things, but a youth without a lot of things that qualify them to be civilized, that lacking, they add to the lawlessness. And the last, but not the least, I don't know, the political sound na kare, with such discredited and opposition that always tries to bring down the Viksit Bharat and is an impediment to that. How would does the government have a policy also to totally do away with the opposition one day? Thank you.
I have two small questions. One, as you say, UCO can deliver only the product quality, but what about the service quality, whether it is private sector or government sector? Other one is, what is the plan about changing mindset? Because we can make highway, expressway, but the people are coming from wrong sides and red light jumping. So what is the inclusiveness in the plan? Thank you very much.
Good evening, Honorable Sir. My name is Dr. Meenakshi Karwal, and I am the director and founder of Elixir Private Limited. That is the latest incorporated startup. And we are working for waste to wealth. We are converting the lawn grass waste into organic manure that has a high potential in comparison to the market available organic manure. So my question, as we are doing the field work and in the agriculture sector and all, we have found that farmers are crying because the waste that is dumped on the sanitary landfill area is getting converted into organic manure, and it is being provided to the farmers at a very cheap rate of around 1 rupees per kg. So how government policies or how we can do anything so that these kind of practices that are absolutely damaging our environment can be coped down. Thank you.
Is that there are so many research facilitating institutions like ICSSR, DST, and they are undertaking so many projects like Viksit Bharat. Right now, ICSSR has governed by, they floated several projects and funded so many researchers. And I'm also one grant awardee. So outcome of these research are generally dumped. Whether there is any mechanism the government is considering to take some of the outcome that can be utilized, because the brain of young researchers have been put, and that was very technical and say research or adapted research methodology, and these outcomes are very essential, I believe.
Good evening, sir. So I am Vivek Saxena. I am presently Principal Chief Conservator of Forest Wildlife in Haryana. Sir, as you told that urban governance has to play a very important role in Viksit Bharat 2047, and by 2050, 50% of India will be urban. So seeing the present cities governance with various challenges, the challenges related to the waste management, challenges related to the cleaner air and water resources, that is a big challenge. And with more cities coming up, how will we ensure that in our ethos, that as one of the participants also questioned about the traffic thing, that in spite of having the roads and all, the traffic movement is like that. We don't have that sort of a civic sense also. A lot of sound pollution also, with lot of honking. So how to ensure that our cities are having cleaner air to breathe and cleaner water resources for drinking?
Good evening, sir. I am professor of the law. My question is a recovery of loan amount. Normally, the bank will given the loan and the company becomes a defaulter. The bank will recover the loan for sell out the movable or immovable property, and nation will get the loan from International Monetary Fund or World Bank. If the nation will not capable to pay or return back that loan amount, what repercussions or how can recovery will take place in that situation?
Last, and then maybe I can just cover it.
Good evening, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to understand is there any blueprint for learning from ourselves? When we say that we are doing very good in case of crisis, a new challenge, but we do not do so good in terms of our regular business. So as we move forward, 2047 is 22 years away. Can we have 4 waves of experience across entities, where the first 20%, I would say 50% only go to the second round, then 50% of them go to the third round. Basic idea is the idea, the institute and the private sector put together in a geography or a domain. When they successfully demonstrate it, they have 3 more rounds to improve and benefit out of it, rather than getting ourselves tied up to the what we have successfully demonstrated to ourselves that we are failing again and again by doing a very, broad-based, well-intentioned and thought-out planning, but then struggling in delivery and ultimately losing somewhere in between. So governance being primarily, keeping an order. So getting 4 good shot at the Viksit Bharat rather than only the one by broad basing it today. Thank you.
Okay, go to the last one.
Good evening, sir. I'm Akansha from Keshav Mahavidyalaya. So, sir, my question is like India is currently हमारा जो working age population है वो 59% है. Okay, and it is expected that after 2041 it will start declining. Okay, so हम अपने demographic dividend को utilize करने के लिए ऐसा क्या initiative लें, job opportunities क्या करें और ऐसा क्या initiative ले सकते हैं कि हमारा unemployment खत्म हो और एक विकसित भारत की तरफ हम आगे बढ़ सके, आत्मनिर्भर भारत हो सके.
A lot of people have said a lot of things.
I think a very diverse range of interesting questions. Some of these I have already touched upon in my address, so I will not repeat them, and please forgive me if I fail to, because I have lost track of some of them. Free ration, for example, this started during COVID, and it was absolutely necessary at that time. And this was actually, if we remember, this is coming from the National Food Security Act, under which subsidized, heavily subsidized food grains are provided to those who are below the poverty line. So this number was pegged at 75%, I think, in rural areas and 50% in urban areas, but it varied from state to state depending upon their poverty ratios. And so rice at 3 rupees per kg, wheat at 2 rupees per kg, and 5 kg per person. So during COVID, in addition to this, 5 kg free was provided. Subsequently, it was felt, that 3 rupees per kg in any case is huge under recovery, and there are costs, transportation, so on, etc. So it should be made free. So that is what is continuing. So sometimes people question, that how long this will continue and such a large number of people. There is another way of looking at it. Many economists talk of, or advocate universal basic income. This is, in one sense, universal basic income in kind, indexed to inflation. The only then question is how many people should get it. So this number, 75%, 50% was as per those, poverty ratios at that time, and it may need to be revisited in future. But that is the basic rationale of this whole scheme. The regional imbalance, see, you will never have a situation, you cannot have a situation of all states being equal. There will be disparity. And if you see over a time frame of 10, 15, 20, 30 years, then there have been changes. Some states have done very well, they have moved upwards. The states which were used to be at the top in per capita income, etc., now they're somewhere in the middle. So these things will happen. This will depend upon the governance in those states, and it is for the people of those states. Ultimately, they have to. It is they decide. the governance in their territories, who will be the ruling dispensation, what kind of policies they will follow. So the central government, the finance commission, they all come into play in trying to, give greater attention to those states which are lagging behind in their own areas of work. So that is essentially a state governance issue. The rural area school, I think there are a number of schemes being run for in agriculture, the direct income support to farmers, then fertilizer being given at highly subsidized rate to farmers, irrespective of the quantity that they purchase, the minimum support price. I mean, there are a whole range of incentives and schemes for rural areas, and similarly in the school education sector. Cities and recovery of loans by banks, IMF, World Bank, we don't now. It's years since, decades since we approached the IMF, and India has gradually scaled down its, borrowing totally from the smaller countries and the funds that they used to have, and even from the World Bank, etc. So I think that is not an issue that is relevant any longer.
Oh, thank you very much. I would agree that it's been a rare experience with the top 7. He has handled all the questions. But as was mentioned in his remarks, the framework is very much in place. There will always be issues. But now perhaps the focus is shifting to new areas, regulation, and also to local government. Local governing bodies, that is taken care of. A lot of these basic services and other things that will be taken care of. I'll just leave one thought with you, which comes out in many of our discussions here, and that relates to essentially defense technologies and defense issues. And you've been in Ministry of Defense also. By and large, there's still a feeling that our decisions, procurement decisions, now we are going into startups and dealing with the private sector. The older rules are still very prohibitive and inhibitive. Although government has unfolded many defense reforms, or things like GFR, the reform of GFR, the financial rule, etc., is still not there. Of course, recently, in September, DPM has been sort of liberalized a little bit. But the short point is that, and also this connects with the R&D thing also. Incentive to fail, he said. If you do not give that chance for R&D, for that failure chance, because R&D is about 1 in 10, success the 9 out of 10. So that some money will have to, you'll have to, but our rules are not taking care of that. So this comes out in practically every discussion, that our financial rules are still very restrictive when it comes to R&D, innovation, defense procurement, and so on and so forth. And we have discussed it, but maybe you could take this back. I'm sure you are very aware of it, but the sentiment from a number of discussions, I thought I'd just convey to you. Yeah. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. In fact, we are just coming out with some reports on startups, etc. We will hear from the startup. And startups issues, MSME issues that Mr. Kohli mentioned. So maybe they should be front-loaded. These reforms need to be front-loaded, and something needs to be done. So thank you very much, Gauba ji.